I don't get up on this floor very often, but I'm going to beg for a few minutes of your time. And I'd remind you that I could cough for 5 minutes and I wouldn't have used up my quota. The reason I'm talking today about the code bill is because it's an area of concern for my constituents. Secondly, it's an area of experience for me, having spent 30 years in a related business, although I will quickly add that I have no financial, no active interest in that business anymore. In my opinion, part of the problem here today is this. In this legislature, that some of you in the metropolitan area simply do not understand the situation in rural Minnesota. Passage of a bill, such as the code bill, others like it, like the warranty bill, possibly the plumber's bill, one by one, burden upon burden collectively, will quickly change our way of life in rural Minnesota. Now, may I remind you, I do not just criticize the bill before us, but permit me, just for a few minutes, to philosophize, to ponder, to tell you, to expound what I think is happening to rural Minnesota. I'm from an area where a handshake is better than a piece of paper, where a man's word supersedes the code book he read, where a reputation is tomorrow's business, tomorrow's job, and where pride and workmanship is a way of life. An area where craftsmanship, productivity, performance become the carrying card, the badge for tomorrow's day of work. And I have to stop and wonder, what will happen to the small town carpenter I know who does good work, builds fine homes, but I really question if he can read or write. Surely he has no concern about a code book. And what will happen to the home builder that I know who works by himself, occasionally builds, works with one or two others, builds one home a year, a flawless home? He could build many more that demand us a greatness time, but he prefers to stay at that low, small level. What will happen to him when we in St. Paul say, you have to do this, you have to do that? And what will happen to the consumer? We've heard consumer protection, who digs his own basement, hires a carpenter to rough it out, finds an old-time plumber, uses a local electrician because he has to, gets the heating system from Sears Roebuck, finds a neighbor to help paint, finishes up himself. What will the statewide code bill do for him? And I think I know what will happen, and that's what I'm telling you today. That lone craftsman, that lone carpenter, that jackknife plumber will decide that the only way for him to go is to go to work for a larger contractor. And what will happen to the young entrepreneur in the same position? Well, he will decide to either become a larger contractor or go to work for a larger contractor, because each will rationalize that they are either too small or must go at it at a larger scale to avoid or keep up with what the state imposes upon them. And here's my message. The big get bigger, the small disappear. The net result will be that everybody will be working for a larger contractor or will become a larger contractor. And then here's what I think will happen. At that time, the trade unions will foist themselves upon us in rural Minnesota. And then we will become what you're asking us to become today, prototypes of the metro area. And I know it will eventually get to that. It will, and I admit in time it maybe should. But I find myself as a rural legislator hard-pressed to understand why we have statewide legislation speeding up this process. Now, there have been amendments. We were referred to the amendments for the farmers. I've supported similar amendments countless times, rural amendments, honestly offered to seek to remove the rural opposition to poor bills. But even here, I find myself asking if we are substituting expediency for principle. If it's wrong, it's wrong. If it's right, it's right. It will not surprise me a bit if someday, not too far away from now, some metro legislator will come before this body with a 60-page housekeeping bill and in one fell swoop remove all such rural references from the statutes. It would not surprise me. Now, I said before, I do not take much of your time. And as these other bills come up, other bills that I share the same concern, you will not find me raising from this chair and talking. I will simply point to my neighbor, sit quietly in my chair and say, same song, second verse, same song, third verse, same song, fourth verse, and end up voting no. These people, these small home builders and homeowners, do not have a lobbying group here in the Capitol. In fact, most of them are not even aware of such legislation. Historically, they react after the fact rather than acting before the fact. And only when something new has been imposed upon them do they ask the question, why was that done to me? Yes, they have no lobbying group. They have only legislators from the rural area in whom they put their trust, believing that rural legislator is down here looking out for them. Consumer protection. Whatever gave you the idea that we in rural Minnesota are like little teddy bears that have to be tucked into our beds from the cradle to the grave, bill upon bill saying consumer protection has become fashionable around here. But I have news for you. I have no demand in my area for all that protection. My people say to me, we cannot afford all the protection you in St. Paul are giving away. I'm for consumer protection when the demand, the need is proven. But I am not for that protection from the cradle to the grave. Sometimes we in rural Minnesota must say to Mother St. Paul, please, Mother, I can do it myself. And in closing, I don't get this excited very often. In closing, someday, I'll predict, not too many years from now when I'm not in this legislature, possibly tired, gray-haired, stoop-shouldered old man, and I'll be back in the little rural area where I live. That someday I wouldn't be surprised at what a neighbor comes up to me and says, Roger, whatever happened to rural Minnesota? Whatever happened? How have all these things happened to us? And at that time, being a timid, gentle soul, I think I'll put my hand on his shoulder and simply say, friend, forgive them. They know not what they do to us in rural Minnesota.